Hey friends, how's it going? Thank you for watching today. I am so excited about this message that I feel like God has shared with me to share with you, and we are going to see some very interesting things. You don't want to miss it. First of all, I'm Sherry here at Sherry Together. This is a space designed so that maybe when you feel like everyone is walking out, you can feel God's presence walking into your life. If you didn't catch last week's video that I was talking about the wilderness, you can catch that also on YouTube. I have a YouTube channel called Sherry Together. So I'll put that in the notes down below so you can find that, and then you can also watch the different videos at different times whenever you want and share them. Well, anyway, I was wondering, last week I asked if anybody knew who the person was that was in the wilderness the first time, because the first time things appear in Scripture are very important. And so this is the first time. And we see the wilderness all through the Bible, in the New Testament and in the Old Testament. So who is this first person that we're going to find in the wilderness? No one has told me yet, so we're just going to head right in. Anyway, our narrative is from Genesis 16. And actually, let me just introduce the two characters that are really mainstream from Genesis 12 on, and that's these two characters, Abraham and Sarah. And they are the patriarchs of the Jewish people. And so we see that God has this special treatment with them. He invites them to leave where they're from, and he gives them these huge promises that he is going to make of them a great nation. And the big struggle is with Sarah's reality. Her reality is she's barren. She can't have children. And so when we open up there in chapter 16, it's after Abraham and Sarah had to go to Egypt because of a famine, and the Pharaoh, the king at that time, had given them lots of cattle and camels and donkeys and servants and maids. And it's at this time where we really believe that the character that we're going to be looking at today was began to live with Sarah and Abraham. And so in chapter 16, in verse 1, it starts off by saying Abram had his wife, Sarah, that couldn't give him any children. It says, but she owned an Egyptian slave named Hagar. And so Sarah devises a plan and says, well, since God isn't giving me any kids, and he's given me this huge promise, let me help him a little bit. And so she gave her servant to Abraham as a concubine. And she says, why don't you just sleep with her? And then that way maybe God will give me children. He'll give us children. So when Hagar finds out that she's pregnant, different things happen, and she runs out into the wilderness. And that's where we find her today in Genesis 16, verse 7. And it says, the angel of the Lord found her by the spring in the wilderness. And the first thing that really leaps out at me is that here we find Hagar, servant girl, who is in the middle of a dysfunctional situation. That's one of the things I love as you look at Sarah and Abraham, you see that they're normal people. They have their struggles, and they have their dysfunctions like all of us. Dysfunction is just when something doesn't work. And really, that's why we all try to look for solutions so that things will work in our life. So we find this couple in a dysfunctional situation, and Hagar is in the middle of it, and she wasn't asked, she was just told, and she was placed in this situation. It wasn't her choice. And so as she finds out she's pregnant, apparently she started getting like an attitude. You can imagine, right? She's pregnant, so she like doesn't feel like doing things, maybe, right? And so it says that she despised her mistress, which was Sarah, and Sarah started treating her really bad. And so she ran out into the desert. And so the angel of the Lord finds her. And that's what I want to tell you. If you are in a wilderness, God will find you. You think, here Hagar was. Abraham didn't go looking for her. Sarah didn't go looking for her. No one from their household is reported that they went looking for her. It says that God found her because her life mattered to him. And your life matters to God. And it says that God found her. It says the angel of the Lord, which, in parentheses, is the first time the angel of the Lord appears in Scripture. And an angel of the Lord, when you study, is a person that they feel would be like Christ, but would come in an angel form and appear to different people at different times on special occasions. And he appeared first to Hagar, a servant girl from Egypt. So God found her. It says he found her there by the spring, and then he asked her a question. And that's what God will do to us too. He's going to ask us questions. And he tells her, hey, Hagar, which, by the way, her name means flight, like hit the road, run. And so he asks her, where are you coming from? And where are you going? And see, she was on the run. And I don't think she really had a plan, right? To see, okay, where am I going? She was just running. She wanted to get away from her problems. And a lot of times we find that we are in a wilderness situation because we are running away from our problem. And so God asks her, where did you come from? Where are you going? And she couldn't tell him where she was going. She just said, I'm running away from my mistress because she didn't talk bad about her. She said, I'm running away from her. And so the third thing we see is that God gives her a promise. And God is going to establish a covenant with Hagar. In the chapter before, he's establishing a covenant with Abraham. Here, the man isn't in the picture. God is establishing his covenant with Hagar. And he says, Hagar, the condition is, if you go back and you submit, put yourself under this authority that you don't like, go back a 180, I'm going to give you a great promise. And that is the child that you have within you is going to be a great nation. And God gives this promise to Hagar. So we find these three things: that God finds us in our wilderness, that he asks us questions, and a lot of times we are just running from a problem, and we're in a wilderness because we're running from a problem. But then God gives her this promise. I want you to go back. I want a 180. Now, here she had a choice. She could have stayed where she was, or she could have gone back. And it wasn't the easiest decision. But she did go back. But before that, God told her, he says, I will multiply you. And the son that you're going to have, his name is Ishmael. And Ishmael means God hears. And to you, my friend that's listening, that's in your wilderness, you need to know that not only God is going to find you there, but that God hears you. It says God heard her affliction. And it's so important when we feel alone, when we feel isolated, when we feel like no one cares, to know that what? To know that God hears. And then she gives God a name, El Roi, which means the living one that sees me. So here we see what? Ishmael, God hears. God hears my affliction. And then she says, El Roi, God sees me. The living one sees me. And so you might think you're all alone in your wilderness. But my friend, you are not alone in your wilderness. God has a message for you, and he will find you in that lonely space. And he gives you promises, and he hears you, and he sees you, and he will be with you. And that is the message that I wanted to leave with you today. And if you have a friend that's going through a hard time, a friend that cares is a friend that shares. Share this message with them. Share this message with them. And next week I will be back to give you the part 2, because unfortunately or fortunately, Hagar not only has Ishmael, but then she's going to wind up in the wilderness again. And next week we'll be taking a look at that. So thank you for watching. I appreciate it. And have a great weekend. And let's just also be placing our prayers there for the high school students and the high school families and just the United States, that God would give us wisdom. We know we need to get these guns off the street, but that God would comfort these families and that God would help us to do something for them. Have a great weekend. Love you, and bye-bye. Thanks for signing in.